So with that being said, we'll bring Eric on.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Eric. Welcome. Thank you very much for your time here this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
My name is Omar. Nice meeting you. I'm with Watchers Talk and, of course, Greg Bornstein with Open Loops.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yes,
Nice to meet you, Greg. Nice to meet you.
John Shaughnessy right here. He's epic. And so I will remove myself from the screen. And Greg, if you want to bio, then it's off to the horses.
Yes, absolutely. I am, it is my great pleasure to introduce Eric, because I'm very fascinated by your story here. Eric J. Hecker currently resides in Alaska. He's a self-educated research investigator that takes from his many odd life experiences and connects with others. He was raised in Long Island, the home of the now famous Montauk Project. His childhood included being part of the Stargate project run by the CIA/DIA, and later on he had experiences in the submarine service. Following that, he became a plumber for some of the wealthiest people in the world back on Long Island. And in 2010, Eric took a contract to work at the South Pole Station for a year. Always the avid researcher, it was not until Eric began working remotely throughout the state of Alaska that he started making connections that his own life may have not been what he thought it was. And now he's working to help others see that things may not be as we were told. Eric, I imagine your presentation is, or your talk is going to be about those experiences.
Absolutely. I'm actually really happy to have such a wonderful introduction and somebody here along with me today, because I'm partial towards dialoguing instead of monologuing.
Yeah.
But that is the long and short of what I intend on doing here today. I'm intrigued now that I actually have someone, because I can do a slideshow of sorts, so to say, but if you would rather do a dialogue and have me interject stuff, I mean, the ball is in your court, Greg, because this is a surprise to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very curious where it starts, given that, well, look, you throw Montauk Project and Project Stargate at me, or I'm going, okay, I know some kind of things here are odd with those, but I'm curious what specifically, do you feel your life intersected though with Montauk? I mean, when did you start noticing things went odd, I suppose?
When did I start noticing things went odd? I would say post South Pole experience. It wasn't until just a few years back up here in Alaska that I started paying attention to, the woes of the world and the science and things like that, and that we've been, misinformed and disinformed to our past. And I was always an avid reader and researcher of history, more or less. But then I guess I started following it contemporarily into the future, or where we are now, and just connecting the dots and, crossing T's and dotting I's and looking at my own past and just saying, wow, holy moly, there's something really weird going on this planet. And a lot of us are being lied to, I think. And I started to, I guess, reassess the path that I walked and the people that I had met and spoken to, the facilities that I had worked at, and just started to, what I call reframe my memories, and just have to go, wow, it's, now that I'm an adult, I can look at things differently than when a child. So, when you get bamboozled as a kid, you don't know it as a kid, but as an adult, you start to learn things and you start to say, well, that would have been inappropriate and that's not right. And then you start seeing it happening in the world around you, and it gives someone great pause. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now that should at the very least give people great pause. And I'll just leave it at that. But back to the Antarctic and the South Pole stuff, I mean, that in hindsight now is huge for me, because this is one of the things that, when you're trying to open people's eyes to the fact that things might not be what they seem, a lot of stuff, and I get it, seems like woo-woo or crazy, and people are like, oh, how dare you say that? But you know what? You start discussing the technology, because everybody likes saying, well, you can't argue with science. Cool beans. Let's discuss the science. Let's discuss what you're saying we can't argue with. I'm game, because there's some science going on this planet that's going to rock people's worlds. And that's basically where I want to go with this today.
Oh, please.
Yeah,
I'm very,
yeah.
you got my brain circling with anticipation.
Yeah, because there's a lot more going on. And you know what I'll do? I'll start out at the beginning of the slideshow. But since I have you here and we can discuss things, it'll be less monologue-y, and we can blitz through. And by all means, ask any questions while we're going through this. Do not hesitate.
Yes, and I'm monitoring the chat too, everybody. So if you have questions about any of this technology or Eric's story, please throw them at there. I will make sure that we get to them.
Cool beans. So we got. This is basically Antarctica proper, overlaid across the U.S. to give people a great perspective of the size of this continent. And, it's larger than the U.S. by 1.5 times, mostly covered in ice. And it's the highest, driest, coldest, windiest continent. And this is the stat that I love. Its highest average elevation is 8,200 feet. So when we were at South Pole, we were actually at 10,300 feet proper.
Wow.
And then this here shows the facilities that the U.S. basically runs. Is Palmer Station out here on the peninsula, McMurdo Station down here in what they call the Ross Ice Shelf, and then we have South Pole here. And this is, I think it was about 900 miles as a bird flies between the two of them. So that's another thing that people need to consider is the distances that we're talking about here. And this is just a quick view. It shows the dissection of what all the nations claim to be, theirs as far as unclaimed, claimed lands. This depiction here, it shows us a whole bunch of unmanned weather stations. So when a lot of folks are doing like Google Earth searches and things like that, and they come across something and this must be, aliens or something like that. It's obviously man-made. It can be man-made. There's tons of stuff that's man-made all across the ice. It doesn't mean that it's, anything nefarious technically. Like, don't get me wrong. There is weird stuff going on down there, but not every peculiar snowdrift is a missile silo.
Interesting.
This depiction here I love because it shows here, looking bottom dead center of the planet. And there's old sailing terms where they would say that once you cross 60 degrees latitude going south, there's no law. And then they say once you cross 70 degrees latitude, there's no hope. And they say that once you cross 80 degrees latitude, there's no God. Which I always found interesting, having resided at 90 degrees south for a year.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. And this was actually a shot from my flight when we were headed out. So this was my crew that I made it to Pole with, and this is one of the C-17s that took us out that way. And this here is the Ross Ice Shelf. So this is where everybody lands when you get to McMurdo. And it's an ice shelf, so it's strictly just planes landing on ice. You can see here they have this balloon for giving direction and wind stuff like that because it does shift a bunch. There's the C-17. They're a very powerful plane. Ta-da! The runway. And that's an overview of McMurdo. That's the main base of all of Antarctica that's run by the U.S. That's the Scott base. It's just a short drive away. It's the New Zealand facility, and it's they share a lot of their logistics with what's going on over at McMurdo. Icebreakers would basically keep that place up and running. They get their main shipments in annually. Logistics is off the wall. They get one large shipment every year for everything that has to happen in the program for the duration of the next year. And they always have very cool vehicles at any facility in Antarctica. These two here, this guy here in the top corner and this guy here in the bottom corner, Snowcat, and this guy here is a Delta. Those are at McMurdo exclusively, but the vans on tracks and the trucks on tracks we have pretty much all over the place. They're a lot of fun. Except for this guy here got caught in a storm, and they lost their path and went over the edge. The story was they got stuck in there. I think it was for something like, I can't remember, overnight or 24 hours, but they had all their cold weather gear with them and rations and things like that. That's stuff that people have to prepare for when you travel in Antarctica. Anytime you leave any facility, everything's very serious. You can get, anything can go wrong, and you have to be prepared to take care of yourself. Just some standard facilities throughout McMurdo. They have everything in there. It's McMurdo is basically like a giant mining town run by college students would be like the best description. They're big into recycling, so don't worry about that one, folks. They're absolutely doing everything they can for due diligence to keep the continent clean. You'd be wildly impressed with that. And these are just basic jobs that happen all over McMurdo, just like a small city. This is some of the berthing compartments, which are rather plush, I guess, for being on the coast of the continent. You'll see when we get to the South Pole stuff, it's a lot harder to live there. McMurdo actually has some sites and hiking trails and wildlife, so there's stuff to do in McMurdo if people happen to be lucky enough to get stationed there. Bike riding, recreational stuff. This is what they call Happy Camper School. So again, since travel on continent can be dangerous and flights have gone down and people have been lost, they train people to do the best that they can against the elements. So here they're teaching them how to do a wind block wall, and they just, they cut up the snow. It's actually a lot lighter than it looks. It's very loosely packed. The density of the snow in Antarctica is very different from everywhere else because you're at basically 0% humidity. So the ice structure, the snow structures is light. So you can move that stuff around with ease. It cuts very easily as well. Oh, no, I'm using the wrong mouse. You can see on the right, that's a tunnel that they dug down, and that's a spot to keep warm and to shelter. You can see on the top, there's actually a sled, an IKEA sled that they used over the trench that they packed the snow on top of. And then that keeps the person inside much warmer. So that's that IKEA sled right there. And this is inside that trench that was just dug down. And that's the idea. If your plane crashes, build one of these. There's Mount Erebus, the view from McMurdo, and that is an active volcano in Antarctica. Some ice structures. And you can even see here, like this gives the appearance that it could be like a pyramid, but it's really not. It's just the angle, and then this is just, it's going over horizontally. But they do have a lot of ice caves over near McMurdo. You can see how well this path has been trodden from people visiting the ice caves. These are the pressure ridges. This is where the actual, the different glaciers coming in from the different mountain chains crush into each other, and the structure changes constantly. It's always in flux. So you can see here, there's even some water pooling up. You got the seal laying there like a lazy seal. But these flags and such, you can see that they stick in as markers for trails. You can see here how this one got twisted up, and it just gets pushed over, and the stuff's just moving all over the place. Here's Scott's old hut from the old expeditions. You can see how everything just stays perfectly preserved in the environment. It's like a giant dry freezer. That's an actual penguin just laying on the table from when they were there. It doesn't even rot or dehydrate. It just sits there.
Yeah, Eric, that's pretty cool with that penguin. I had a friend of mine, Brad Olson, go to Antarctica a couple of years ago, and he showed us I believe it was a penguin that had died like
Mhm.
thousands of years ago, and it was still there. I wonder if you had the
Mhm.
opportunity to see that one.
That does ring a bell, actually. It could just be because I'm familiar with the statement as well, though, from the program and other folks that I know that have been to Scott's Hut. So it's hard for me to discern where I heard that info from. But yeah, the animals, as long as the other animals don't consume them, like this one's protected because it's indoors. So yeah, it'll just sit there forever and ever and ever. When I was at the South Pole Station, we actually had in one of our storage berms. They call it a berm. It's just a pile of stuff stacked outside in the elements. But they found a skua, a dead seagull, and is completely intact, and nobody knew how long it was there for, and it caused a whole big hubbub because it was 900 miles away from where it was supposed to be. So it caused a big hubbub in science to figure out, the mystery of how this skua made it to pole. And the penguins, of course. They're all over the place. And none of the wildlife in Antarctica is pensive about humans being around them at all. They're just, they're very curious. They'll come right up to you. And, the way that people are supposed to function is to just, be standoffish. Like, don't bother the animals. Don't antagonize them. Don't instigate them. Just, let them be. The seals. And that's my girlfriend who produced all these slides. She's the more digital person. Here we can see the icebreakers pumping in. That's that shipment that comes in. Once a year, they top off the tanks, bring in all the materials that's needed for everything on the continent, and then they distribute accordingly. You can see here that the sea ice has actually been, busted and cut through to bring right into McMurdo, what they call Mactown.
Just curious as to how it was on your physical and your mental health going from the North Pole, from the top of the planet, to the South Pole. Did that have any adverse effects on you? Did you need time to adjust to the pressure or to the altitude or anything like that? Because I know there's probably a huge difference, right, between North and South.
Well, I was residing in New York at the time, and technically we went from New York to Centennial, Colorado, and we did a pit stop there for some training. Excuse me. Then we went to New Zealand, basically, and I was in New Zealand for about a week, which was more incidental because it was more a weather delay to keep us in New Zealand, because they absolutely were intending on sending us right to McMurdo, which would have been on the coast of Antarctica, which is the facility that we're looking at right now in the photos. So I don't think they were intending to slow down our roll at all. They just got us right into it. Now I can tell you this much: when we got to South Pole, we certainly were told to relax, observe, and acclimate for a few days, because we certainly were now thrown into 10,300 feet of elevation, atmospheric conditions that made it seem even worse than that. So even though we were at 10,300 feet of elevation, we would be given what they called a physio altitude, a numerical value that was higher than our altitude. So they would give us a number, and they called it the physio altitude, but they would still use it in altitude numbers. So even though we were at 10.3, they would tell us, sometimes they would say we're at 11.3. And we were to just understand that it's going to feel like that. So we had a scroll in the galley that would constantly let us know what the physio altitude number is. But after a while, you could start to feel it. You just knew.
I see. I get it. It's like 30 degrees and 40 degrees with a humidex, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it just became the more pertinent number. So we would just pay attention to the physio altitude. We just called it the altitude. Like, what's our altitude? And that would matter, because if you were getting geared up to go outside, it changed, what you planned on doing, how long you're going to be outside for, where are you headed to, that type of stuff.
Okay, cool.
This here is the actual flight going to pole. So I got lucky when I went that I was able to jump into the cockpit with the crew for the flight out to pole. So that was a total plus. And I got to fly over the Transantarctic Mountains, which were just freakishly gorgeous. To fly over Antarctica, it's a different kind of beauty. I mean, you're seeing mountain ranges completely filled almost from peak to peak by glaciers. And at that altitude, it's like you can see the motion of the ocean. Like the flow is very defined and like beautiful. It's almost like looking at almost like sand sculpture inside glass. You know, you can see all the different moves and curves and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're just watching Mother Nature just flow, I guess is the best way to put it.
Did you see any nunatucks while you were flying over the mountains?
What are you calling them?
The nunatucks or the pyramids that appear to be pyramids on the Antarctic continent.
I had not.
I understand people down there, or the pilots, or folks down there, they're called them nunatucks, and I don't know. The word kind of stuck with me. Brad Olson mentioned that to us, that they may not be pyramids, but people down there call them nunatucks, but not enough information in trying to figure out whether what appears to be pyramids down there are whether artificial pyramids, or are they just like mountain peaks that are sticking out.
Understood. I mean, it's a massive continent of which I flew a flight path. I mean, there's a lot of Antarctica I did not see, which would be like 99% of it. I went from McMurdo to South Pole, and then from South Pole back. I mean, and I'm pretty sure they probably took darn near the same flight path. So I would have seen the same set of mountain peaks, the same from two different directions as well, twice. And I did not myself see a pyramid that I recall. I have some pictures and video from it, but I didn't see anything. And that's the first I've ever heard of the term Nanatuk. Sounds like a native Alaskan term, actually.
Yeah, so I had the same thought when he had mentioned it. Nunatucks, mm-hmm. I think he called them. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's it's kind of cool. Sounds very Aboriginal.
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah. This here is an overview of the elevated station, and you can see the skiway right here. This is how close the planes come, and they just park here. They discharge their passengers and then hook up to the fuel system and discharge the fuel so that the station can get refueled. That's how we get it delivered. And this is a backside view. So then this is the skiway coming in proper from just the other direction, and you can see there's just a variety of outbuildings and things scattered across. And the section down here is in the summertime, we work out of these. So, each of the trades gets one of these tents. It's called the Jamesway. So we had a plumbing Jamesway, and, that's like our plumbing shop.
Hey, Eric, Greg Herrera in the chat is asking, who is funding all this and what is the purpose of this base? Research?
You got it. The National Science Foundation gets a check from the Congress every year to cover everything that they do. And the National Science Foundation then distributes money to the United States Antarctic Program. And then the United States Antarctic Program hires all the companies that do all of the work to make everything happen. The pretense is absolutely that this is your taxpayer dollars going towards science. And I refute that. And by the end of this presentation, I hope to have changed your mind.
Yes, that's what I imagined. I was going, is Greg asking for the real answer or the, no, definitely excited for you to dig even further into this.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, it's like in a way, I'm trying to let people see how remote, how much is going on here to keep this out of your purview. Wow. We're talking the South Pole, Antarctica. That's me right there, and Holly, and this is what they call Destination Alpha, the main entrance by the skiway to get into the facility. And this is the scroll. So this is what we would walk into and you'd see on the monitor. So June 17th, this would have been 2011. It's a Friday. The temperature is only minus 69 degrees. We don't care about wind chill at South Pole. That's a total joke. We just look at the wind, which is a nice wind, 13 knots, and look at our elevation. It's only 10.3. That's low. That's a great day to have to work outside. South Pole Station, if there's no wind, you are in the South Pole environment, so it gets extremely cold. Anytime it's windy, that means the wind is coming from somewhere else, which also means it's warmer because it's coming from somewhere else. Everywhere else is warmer. So this is a good day for me to go outside and do my rounds because it's a nice warm breeze and the elevation is not going to kick your butt.
Got a interesting question here for you, Eric.
Go for it.
Just quickly find it because there's just so many chat rooms. There we go. It's from Bob from Full Spectrum Universe. Bob Kenter. There are ice peaks that look like pyramids of sorts. It's a big continent. Ask him if he flew over the Nazi entry point and or Admiral Byrd's flights into the Earth's mysterious hollow center. Thank you.
I had not flown over either of them. I gather that they're probably not looking to take folks like me in the program and fly us right over them with cameras. I mean, that would be silly of them. If I don't doubt that they're there, I didn't see them. I'm very familiar with Byrd's reports and the testimonies of others. I was coming in from the other side of the continent from New Schwabenland to begin with. It's like literally on the other side of the continent from McMurdo as the pole flies. So even, you know, that's again what I'm trying to emphasize on folks is this continent is huge. I spent a year in Antarctica and saw very little of it. A lot of other people have spent much less time than me there and should probably not speak for the whole continent.
And there's also a no-fly zone there as well, right? I think Admiral Byrd's, wherever he was, I think there's like a massive area that you're not allowed to fly over.
I keep hearing rumors of that as well from folks that don't fly in Antarctica often. I have a map over my head. As a matter of fact, I don't have to switch to it, but I have a map from the program for navigational purposes. In the key, it shows, you know, what to look for what's considered a no-fly zone, right? So that you don't fly there. I'm still scouring this map, trying to see where this no-fly zone is that everybody's talking about.
I'll be able to get you that information, Eric.
Okay, because every person I know in Antarctica that flies doesn't know about this no-fly zone.
I'll talk to Brad. I believe he's coming on tomorrow.
10-4.
And then when I talk to him, I'll get the information from him and I'll forward it to you so that you have it for your records.
I have a record right over my head. I have the maps from the program. I mean, this is fantastic. I'll be more than happy to take a look at the information provided. But that's oftentimes people keep telling me that there was a no-fly zone, like right at Pole. So it's confusing to me. I mean, again, Brad Olson wasn't at Pole, correct?
Pardon me?
He never went to the South Pole, correct?
I don't think he went to the South Pole. He was in Schwaben Bay and a couple other places, the Ross Shelf and where else? It's been a while. Yeah, it was all over. I don't think he went to the South Pole though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have anybody provide more than the speculative statement that there's a no-fly zone. I keep hearing that. I keep asking people to show me documentation that goes against the maps that I possess, but I've yet to see that. I don't know what to say. But back to my next slide.
I'm not sure either, because the first time I heard about no-fly zone in Antarctica, my first question was, why? There's not too much happening down in Antarctica, unlike
exactly.
But why is there a no-fly zone down there? But from what I've been hearing, there's a no-fly zone. So I will try to get that information.
No worries. I mean, and that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to debunk a lot of the erroneous information that's out there in regards to Antarctica. I mean, I'm from the program. I was at the South Pole for a year. I'm hired by Raytheon. You know, this, like in this scene here, this is the plumber's dreams way that I mentioned before. So this is at the South Pole Station. That's my name signed on the building right there. You know, so I mean, that's reality. I get that a lot of people hear a lot of things about Antarctica. I don't know what to tell them. You heard wrong, you know, to put it nicely. There's pretty much, you can fly depending on your finances. Another fable about Antarctica that everybody hears is that you're not allowed to go to Antarctica. That there's some rule or something that you're not allowed to do. The Antarctic Treaty, you can't go there. And that's just false. You know, it's just completely false. You can call any travel agent and tell them you want to book a trip to Antarctica, and they'll put a price to it.
What part of the year did you go down there?
I arrived on the ice in November of 2010, and I departed 366 days later in November of 2011.
Holy wow, man. Like almost a full year you spent down there. That's very cool.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. So it's like I have a deep appreciation for people's experiences, and I respect them for the value thereof. But I know a couple of folks that have spent probably 6 to 8 hours in Antarctica and then speak a lot about it. It's just interesting to me. Here's the power plant. The last gentleman that you had on would have loved visiting this room. I heard some of that talk, and he seemed very mechanically inclined, and I agree 100% that he would probably make great staff at South Pole Station, because it is very much an environment where when things break, you need to fix them quickly and correctly. It's a harsh environment. This is some of the accommodations at South Pole. This here on the left is what they call a Jamesway, which is basically a Korean War tent with a hot air furnace in it. It wasn't really much for comfort. This stuff here was in the elevated station, which at the time was brand new. So it was rather plush, I would say, going from the winter season to the summer season. Oh, this is fun. So this is Robert. Robert was on our crew for our winter season. He holds the record for the most winter over seasons ever at the South Pole Station. Take a guess at how many winters this man has spent at the South Pole. A winter season going from 8 to 10 months, depending on weather conditions. Anyone? He did 15 winter seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. 15 winters at Pole.
That is a veteran for sure.
Yes. So here's a quick little video that we put together to let folks see what it's like to gear up to go outside. Lots of layers. Lots of layers.
Holy.
Just keep throwing them on. More and more. Ta-da! And that's effectively what a scientist looks like when they go outside at the South Pole in the wintertime. And that's him basically gearing up. He's going to do, it's probably take him about 15 minutes to walk to his telescope that he works on, dressed like that.
What does he do down there that he spent 15 seasons there?
He ran a science experiment in the dark sector. He was in charge of what was called the MAPO laboratory, which had a couple of telescopes in there. And they were, the telescopes there are looking outwardly at great distance to basically look for stars and clusters and things that are signs of life. And here you can see another person geared up to go outside. You can see the flag lines that they'll put out sometimes to give you direction from one building to another. if you're lucky, depending on which building. That's me in both pictures. This shot is in the summertime, and it was at the tail end of the season when I started to realize that this mask is effectively useless. It would still just freeze up on the interior and obscure your vision anyhow. So I had to start transitioning to learn how to cover my face differently. This wasn't so bad in the summertime. This picture here on the right, though, was from messing up in the wintertime and leaving some skin exposed and thinking that I had rectified it when I was out and about. I got back into the facility and realized I had messed up.
How long were you in the elements before when you got that?
Oh, that would have been, let's see. So I was walking back from doing my rounds in the dark sector right over where Robert's laboratory was. I was walking back from his building and messed it up, and it probably was, it would have been the same walk that he was on. So it was about 15 minutes of like a teeny little crack in my gear. I probably had about maybe 15 pieces of headgear on, and just by not layering them correctly, there was some wind getting in somewhere, and it was dark. I was halfway through, it was either go all the way or turn back, so I just kept going, and I was blowing like in my mouth, like up towards where I thought the wind was hitting me, and in my mind I was thinking, oh well, I'm blowing the hot air over there and it's feeling better, so good, I'm fixing it, was what I was thinking. But no, it was just freezing, and I was losing the sensation, so I wasn't accomplishing anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. The best laid plans of mice and men.
Wow, 15 minutes, eh? That's fast to get frostbite like that. I live in Canada, but raised in Edmonton, and it gets down to minus 40, minus 45 with the wind chill. 48 about there somewhere, and that's pretty cold.
I believe on that occasion, I think that it was about, I think it would have been in the minus 70s or minus 80s at the time that occurred.
Oh, man, that sounds cold.
Yep. So now here's actually, so this is the destination that I was walking to. So right here on the right is the building known as MAPO, and that's the laboratory that Robert would work in. Just beyond that, you'll see this other building, and that's the actual South Pole Telescope, which is this guy up here, the 10-meter telescope. This is it in the wintertime. This is another great shot of it in the wintertime. It's so beautiful there in the winter. I mean, look at that landscape. But these items are looking outwardly. This guy here, the South Pole Telescope, is just basically finding stars and other planets at a savage rate. I mean, it was 10 years ago that I was there, and I would walk in there every day and be talking to the science crew, and they'd be, locating and locating and locating. They're not having trouble finding stuff. That's what they're looking for. How old is the universe? What kind of things are in the universe? How has the universe changed as it's aged? That's the science that they present us on the South Pole Telescope. Here's the balloon inflation facility for putting up weather samples. Antarctica has the cleanest air in the world. Very, very pure. So is the ice. The content of this ice on the ground is pure. It's H2O with almost nothing else in it. No minerals, nothing. We actually have to add water to the content so that it's usable. This here is the creme de la creme of oddities at South Pole Station. This is the ice cube neutrino detector. It's comprised of, well, let's get rid of that entirely, 5,160 digital optical modules suspended along 86 strings, cables embedded in a cubic kilometer of ice beneath the South Pole. It detects neutrinos through tiny flashes of blue light called Cherenkov light, produced when neutrinos interact in the ice. There are 275 physicists in 12 countries and 48 institutions collaborating on this science. And if you look here, this is the laboratory in the inset. The arrows, actually, that's incorrect. That's going to the elevated station. But right over here is where the neutrino lab actually is. And each of these dots indicates a cable that's going down into the ice that has all of these DOMs, the digital optical modules on them. Here you can see the ice cube driller crew. This is the gear that they're setting up to do the drill holes and the reels for the steam lines. That's the drill head. So it's just a hot water system. It's very easy to drill in the ice. That's another fib that's being told off ice. Is you'll hear about all these science facilities. You hear about Vostok and all these things where they talk about it taking years to drill and get down to stuff, and that's just not true. You can melt ice really fast. It's just physics. These are the DOMs that they stick down in the ice at the ice cube neutrino detector. Again, key important thing, 5,160 of these DOMs. This one is actually in the main lobby right there at the South Pole, Destination Alpha, when you first walk in. And this is a depiction. So this is the ice surface here, as we've shown before, all the different dots. This is the elevation of the ice over the bedrock in Antarctica. So this is all ice thickness, basically 2 miles thick of ice. And you can see this is what the Eiffel Tower would look like if it was sitting down on the bedrock in this diagram here. So now consider this gigantic sacred geometry hexagonal array is 2 miles tall, over 1 kilometer in area, and has all of these DOMs on it. Now they're telling us that this item is for detecting. You have all these huge cables, massive computing going on. You can see here, this is a rendition of what they're telling us. When a neutrino comes through the ice, the idea is that when it impacts the nucleus of one of the water/ice molecules, the blue light flashes, a muon, a new particle is released, but the blue light flash is then detected by the DOM array, which you'll see is this bloom, this cluster of flashing lights. And then it gives a direction to which the neutrino had come from. And that's what we're being told. Here's another shine of the bloom. But it's not that simple, because I've uncovered that this thing does something else. It is not simply just a detector. It also does this. This is a document about the construction of the DOM, the digital optical module. And you can see in here, let's see, that the output is 2,047 volts. The maximum high voltage is 2,047 volts per DOM, 5,160 of them. Folks, this is a massive phased array system embedded in the ice that nobody's talking about. This is like a hidden HARP system. And in addition to that, now I don't have documentation for this aspect of my testimony, but in my travels as a tradesman at the South Pole Station, I have to oftentimes de-energize equipment. And in that process, I go into other rooms and other circuit breaker panels, and I have to make sure that things are safely turned off.
Is that because of the piezoelectric, or is that because of the static electricity that
to turn things off?
Yeah, like
just for safety's sake, right? So imagine I have to work on a generator or something like that, or anything that has power to it. I have to make sure that I don't electrocute myself. So I have to follow the power sources back and isolate things, right? So that puts me into sub panels and breaker panels, and I start having to look at things. So in my travels, in trying to lock out and tag out things, I come across energized equipment that, according to my prints, is saying is de-energized. So that gives me great pause when I start seeing that the equipment that I'm working on isn't labeled appropriately, right? That's a big problem. Hey, this says it's supposed to be off, but I'm seeing it is on. Now this thing that I'm working, like, I have to have questions. So I run it up the chain of command, and long story short, I find out that the ELF equipment, the extra low frequency system, that was supposed to be de-energized, is not de-energized. It's up, it's live, it's hot, it's running. Now, at the time, I didn't have any thoughts on needing to prove that to anybody. It would have been nice if I could have got that documented, but it was just one of those things, that at the time, the boss is like, nope, that's the way that it's supposed to be. Carry on with what you're doing. There's not a problem. So that's an I moment is, the way I look at it. But in hindsight, now I have the wherewithal to know that the ELF system is running. I now have documentation to prove that the ice cube neutrino detector is not simply just detecting. It absolutely has the ability to transmit a massive amount of transmit power. And I am now doing due diligence to find out for folks what exactly is really going on down there, because it's not what we're being told. And we can see that happening all over the place, that things are going on that we're not being told. And it doesn't take much due diligence to find out what some system like this can do potentially. We are staring down the barrel of a type of modern warfare that people just haven't considered yet. Directed energy weapons have been being discussed for quite some time. Excuse me. At the very least, in a research and development capacity, as far as the civilian population is concerned. But history has shown us that usually by the time the civilian population becomes aware of something, that means that the military has been using it against the other militaries of the world for at least a couple of decades.
I was going to say too late.
Exactly.
By the time it gets into the public hand, it's too late.
Exactly. So I believe that in light of everything that's going on with disclosure contemporarily, I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and that the government is certainly not going to give us the disclosure that everybody deserves, that we're looking for. But I do believe they simply left the door open. These programs are going to get spoken about, and it's the right thing to do for the people. Mm-hmm. The ability for them to transmit, the potential for nefarious deeds is really off the wall. We have people talking about Neuralink things and pros and cons thereof. Well, what if they're underinformed to what the potential threats are? I mean, straight up, are we marching into a 1984 type world where, people get themselves chipped and they think one thing, but next thing you know, there's a frequency flipped on at one pole and a frequency flipped on at another pole, and some evil villain wringing his fingers somewhere going, they all fell for my plot? I mean,
do you think something like that could be happening from what you just showed us? And then HARP up in Alaska?
I am thoroughly convinced that we are in the throes of an electronic warfare environment, and that the battlefield is the mind, and people they can't even begin to comprehend that. We are not going to be attacked by weapons of conventional war in a way that we are familiar with. That's over. The threat of it will be thrown in our faces all day long. They'll scare us with it all day long. There's never going to be a nuclear war. We're not going to have nuclear strikes. It's not going to happen. But what they will do is
scare the shit out of everybody.
Yeah, they'll scare the shit out of everybody, and they'll subvert their attention by attacking them with things that people don't even know exist.
Mm-hmm. We actually saw examples of that in the California fires a couple of years ago, where we were seeing these beams coming down and blowing up gas stations and lighting forests on fire. So we've already seen examples of that.
Yes, there are examples that we could see, and they're multifaceted weapons. I mean, that's a physical attack on a physical thing, and I agree that those directed energy weapons also exist. But now I'm of the belief that the South Pole Station and things like HARP are more mental, that they're more targeted at different frequencies. Lest we forget that we, as functioning human beings, we have an electrical system that operates at very specific frequencies, and our brains operate at very specific frequencies. And science has shown, this is the science that people don't want to argue, science has shown our brain doesn't care where it's getting the frequency from. It'll take it and it'll absorb it and use it as information.
Eric, this is Greg here. Let me ask you something. In terms of, you wonder what this thing is. You ask a person, they kind of blow you off. Were there other people that, when you were there, I mean, obviously there were other people with you. Do you have any other experiences of talking to anyone else and going, hey, I'm not getting an answer on this. What is going on with this electrical force?
Absolutely. I am only here because of the collaboration of other people. I did not singularly figure all of this stuff out. It's through my efforts and collaborating with other concerned folks to get to where I am. There are people from my crew, my winter crew, are damaged, similar to Havana syndrome type symptoms. There are folks that are suffering from my winter over crew. I believe that we were at some sort of a facility that also had an offensive capacity in some way. I believe because of that, we were engaged in some sort of directed energy weapons warfare, that we had a directed energy warfare weapon enemy out there unbeknownst to me, that we were either injured from the use of these weapons and our proximity to them, or from an attack from others that were trying to take out our facility. I mean, I think this is as bizarre as things can get, but why wouldn't it? I mean, what are we supposed to believe? That we're all just sitting there, 49 people risking our lives over the course of a winter to count stars? That's why Raytheon Polar Services is the contractor when I was there, and why Lockheed Martin is the contractor now. Like, in order to be in charge of cooking and cleaning at the South Pole Station, apparently you also have to be able to build missile systems. You can't just be into janitorial.
Right. That is super weird.
Right? Because I mean, I work up in the oil fields and the gold mines and the remote camps in Alaska. And, we don't need military contractors to take care of these remote camps. I know there's other avenues, but I guess down in Antarctica, you just need to make sure you're ready for anything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We have a question here, 2 questions from Bob Kenter, over on watching over on the Full Spectrum Universe channel. And Bob is asking, well, actually, the 2 questions. One, has Eric any experience with the nanoscience of monoatomic layered, graphene dioxide? Can you answer that question?
I'm familiar with it, just that people are talking about it a bunch contemporarily.
Right.
And it's interesting to me, the nano stuff, because I believe, again, in the grand scheme of the modern warfare that we're in now, I believe we need to make sure everybody understands the scale of nano.
Yeah. And then the other question is, and I was kind of wondering this too, where exactly are you calling from right now?
I'm in Alaska.
I wonder, does the question go beyond that? Maybe, Bob, I mean, it kind of looks like you're in some kind of base or something.
Oh, no, I'm just in a really cool room. So, like, this is the map that I was even referencing before, right? This is a map from the program. I have a key right here.
I thought that was
a key right here that says whether, there's a no-fly zone or not. I mean, I can look all over this map, and this is a navigational map that could be used for piloting. And it doesn't say don't fly here, and it doesn't say don't fly there. I mean, I get that it's logistically ridiculous and dangerous for a flight to go in this direction, because you're going away from all resources of help. It's impractical for flights to want to go over Antarctica. That's all it really boils down to. So it's a no-fly zone by practicality, not by defense or restriction, because who's there restricting it?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question. Very good question.
You know, that's what I'm saying. No one's going to stop you. Everybody talks about you can't go to Antarctica. You can't do this. Really? Who's going to stop you?
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have who am I over at the Watchers Talk channel says conventional warfare is wasteful and inefficient when compared to bioweapons, chemical weapons,
Directed
nukes.
energy.
Yeah, they're also very dirty, cleanup issues, and then there's oh yes, DEW. DEW, and such can process global or residual chem radiation, the clean afterwards, sick, all of it. Also more stealth and some plausible deniability if no witness, plus cover-ups.
Yeah, it's the ultimate remote location to get away with whatever you want. Everybody that I've shown the interior of the Ice Cube facility, like all the rows and rows and rows and rows of servers that they have.
Yeah.
Everyone is like, that does not make any sense. It doesn't make sense to have that much processing power going on. Put it this way, to put it into perspective, part of the reason that I would have to do my rounds out to the detector every day to make sure that because it's computing so much stuff, right? The amount of heat coming off of these servers, remember, this is the winter time at the South Pole Station. The amount of heat coming off of those computers is dissipated by a thermostatically controlled louver that allows exterior air in. So they displace, they take the cold outside air in to keep that building from overheating. That's how much they're processing.
Wow.
So I would have to go out there to make sure that the chicken wire grate on the snorkel inlet wasn't covered in snow so that when the louver's open, it wasn't sucking a dead duct. So that's what I would go out every day. I'd have to go out there and I'd knock the chicken screen to get the ice off so the louvers can open and let the freezing cold air in to chill the computers that are processing so much information that they burn the building down.
Has there ever been a fire down there that?
Oh yeah, yes.
That they had to battle, yeah.
Yeah, I was the lead on the fire brigade, and that was the scariest moment in my life.
I bet.
We had the alarms go off. I mean, we would have alarms go off regularly. We had medical issues. You know, we would have people get injured, lost. Things would happen. We would have emergency responses. We had 4 different teams. There's Team 1 was the first responders. Team 2 was the fire brigade. Team 3 was, I think, medical, and I think Team 4 was logistics. I might have 3 or 4 backwards at this point. But either way, something goes wrong. Team 1 goes and assesses immediately, so they can define the resources that Team 2, which is myself and some folks, where we gear up in full fire SCBA everything to rock and mitigate whatever the problem is when those guys call back what the issue is. So on one particular day, in the middle of winter, the alarms go off, and it's an alarm for a fire at Cryo, which is a big deal for us because we have, I believe it's 500,000 gallons of helium chilled at about 4 degrees Kelvin, which is really freaking cold. And what we were trained was that if that was going to leak or break or be compromised by fire, the hoses, that a rapid discharge would cause a rapid discharge, and it would increase at a expansion rate of 500 to 1. So it would be a big boom, was my understanding, was what we were taught. The alarm went off. My co-lead and I were gearing up, and because of the elements in our training, we're more or less dressing each other, gearing each other up, placing the things in the right spot. It's more expedient than trying to dress yourself and then saying, hey, did I do it right? You know, so you're just dressing each other. This goes here, that goes there. And we're listening to the radios and we're discussing that it was a very cold day. We were having a lot of issues when we were responding to emergencies outside with our gear breaking. So there were new processes that we were following. So we were like really double checking ourselves and going through the motions and discussing, like, make sure we do this. Don't break this hose this time, you know, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden our radios fired up that this was a fully employed fire at the Cryo. And she and I just stopped talking. It was like, wait, what? And we hear I could hear their voices. They were, and I know they're leaving this because this is an outbuilding. So this is a fully employed fire. They called it. I know they're leaving. There's no reason for them to be there. So her and I just shut our mouths and we continued gearing up. And we grabbed our extinguishers and we exited through Destination Zulu, which is basically the back door and the shortest path to get to the situation. And we knew no one else was coming until we went there still. Like we were the first wave now. We had our extinguishers and we were walking towards this building, and it was dark winter, but it was there was moonlight that night, and I could see the smoke coming out of the building. The building was backlit. It was like a movie scene, and I remember just walking and hearing the squeaking of the ice, and she was on my side of me, and I remember just looking over and looking at the building, and I just kept thinking, that wall's going to come to me at Mach 12 right now. I'm going to see a flash. I'm going to watch that building turn around, and then that wall is going to hit me at Mach 12. And I just kept thinking that as I was walking towards the building. And we didn't say a word. We breached the door, and it was billowing smoke. We discharged our extinguishers, put the fire out. It didn't blow up, and I was like, I'm flipping out right now thinking about it still. Like I'm losing my breath. It was a crazy moment. It's just there's not a lot of times where you can really feel like you're walking to your demise, and then you make it. I really thought we weren't going to make it through that one. It was just like going through the motions.
Here's an interesting question, Eric. Who owns the servers?
Great question.
Yeah.
I would presume that it's the University of Wisconsin. It's my understanding that entire operation, the academia, the information is being run through the University of Wisconsin.
Should go look into University of Wisconsin and see what they're up to down there.
That's how all of these programs work. Is they're some scientist is said to come up with an idea, and then they get funding, and then a college will back them, and then they get students, and they'll call it education. This is how these programs work. And what they're certainly not going to do is say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to build a giant directed energy weapons array at the South Pole Station. Who's in?" Me. Everything has to be under false pretenses.
Yeah.
We have the HARP array up in Gakona, Alaska. That's above ground. You can look at it. You can see it. Nobody can debate that it's there. But boy, is anybody ever going to be honest about what it can do?
Yeah.
Do you think those servers and whatever is going on down there is somehow connected to 5G?
I think it's way more nefarious. I think it's way beyond that.
Yeah.
I think, and to add to, I believe all of these things, right, have their own primary mission that they're presented as, which seems benign. 5G cell phones, it's benign. It's not going to hurt you, right? HARP, we're just doing ionospheric weather research. The ice cube neutrino detectors, just looking for blue flashes of light. So they all have their bogus presentation, but then they also have what they can do as a secondary mission, but they also have tertiary. They keep going. You'd be surprised at how many levels these things can function on. And then also, each thing is in and of itself still a component that now when you start taking things like, at the South Pole Station, we have the ice cube neutrino detector. We also have the ELF. Well, what happens when you work with the guys that are in Gakona? What happens when you work with the guys that are over in Los Alamos? When you take a component from here and a component from there, and we start looking at systems globally.
Mm-hmm. They just had a report back, 4, 5, 6 months ago about that big crack that took place down there. And I'm kind of wondering if that may have had something to do with that.
It is possible. There's a lot going on with the ice and a lot of misconceptions. First and foremost, the greatest misconception is that by ice calving in Antarctica is an indication of global warming is ridiculous. It's the contrary. It's an indication of a massive amount of ice accumulation because the ice moves off continent over the sea, lest we forget. It's floating on the ocean when it's calving off. So the ice only has so much structural integrity. It can only grow so tall and go out so far before it's going to fall off. It's not temperature related. It's a lack of structural integrity because of excessive growth. The temperatures in Antarctica have been dropping every year since I've been there. And the lunatics are trying to present that as global warming's cause.
I was just thinking that. Global warming, how is that even possible when the planet is down?
I mean, the information coming out of Antarctica is some of the most bold-faced lies that I've ever seen.
Now,
I know it because I've been there, you know, and it's frustrating to me that everybody buys into this because there's this huge propaganda. There's like this entrenched something that it's required for everybody to not know the truth about Antarctica, and heaven forbid you try to remove the veil about what's really going on.
I heard that the western side of the continent, Antarctica, is cooling much faster than the eastern side. Is there any truth to that?
I'm not 100% sure on the sides. I couldn't answer that one on temperature on the sides. It's my understanding that the South Pole area specifically, I'm focused on, is dropping every year on average, and that the continent on average is also dropping on a whole. I couldn't be more specific than that in my own references. The only other thing that I know about temperatures and fluctuations since I've been there is that it is my understanding that there is a massive amount of volcanic activity happening under the western Antarctic shelf in the last 10 years has been increasing a lot.
Okay, yeah, that could be. Maybe I had it mixed up because I know that there's volcanic on one side, and they were saying that one side is is losing ice, but the other side of the continent is gaining in ice, and there seems to be a perfect polarity of things, because here we have the South Pole, which is getting colder and colder and colder by the year, and then we look at the North Pole up in Northwest Territories and northern Canada, Alaska, and those areas are getting warm. Do you have any thoughts on that as to like why one hemisphere would be getting colder and the other getting warmer, and they're on opposite ends of each other?
I do. I can only say that my experience in the great north of Alaska is that it's not getting warmer. I mean, I hear people saying it, but it's not been my experience or the experience of folks that I know up here. I get out pretty remote pretty regularly, and it still seems pretty frigid. I mean, I've been as far north as Barrow, Alaska. I've constructed ice roads between Nukai and Spy Island. So, I mean, I've literally been on sea ice still. It's still out there every winter.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the Northwest Passage, because they're saying that the ice is melting earlier and the ice is forming later on in the year, and that they're going to be using that as a seaway. And it seems to be a little bit of a political issue with that. So I was just wondering as to like why the northern part would be getting warm, and then the southern side is gaining ice, and then of course the Northwest Passage. I'm sure everyone's aware of that, and why that area would be warming up. It's a very interesting mystery.
It is interesting. I do see that. I mean, and that's actually much further north in the pack sea ice and stuff like that. And I don't doubt that this thing's changing up there. I haven't been there, but I do see everybody planning for that. Certainly. Yeah. So what I mean, not for nothing. Like whether it melts, and they told us it melted or not, right? Because we don't, unless we go there, we don't know. That's another thing people really need to start understanding, is people can start saying a lot of stuff, and it could be bold-faced lies. We can be told, we can literally be told that the Northwest Passage melted, when it turns out they're just using icebreakers to bring traffic through. I mean, that's a reality that could occur that no one would really know unless they went there. Because if the television kept telling them it was global warming and that the ice melted, and they never mentioned an icebreaker, as long as the people were getting their iPads delivered cheaper, they're not going to care.
Yeah, good point on that. Yeah. Because we know that the media lies, right? We know
all day long.
Yeah, every day, all day.
We're learning that they're lying to the most extent they possibly can imagine. We're learning that more and more every day. So the way I look at it is, if I can imagine the lie right now, right off the top of my head, I imagine that a team of people imagined it at least a week before me and are working on it. Because that's how evil people seem to be in the media.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, no, it is. There definitely there's so many agendas that keep us in the dark about things, and you know what? Even with regard to and this is where I want to go next. With I know we have 20 minutes left, but I have to ask about this. How do you think this connects, Eric, to your childhood, especially including being part of the Stargate project?
Oh my goodness, I've just made major connections recently to like put everything together. I believe that as a child, we'll go full picture here. As a child, I had a relative who was in the German American Bund, which was a pro-German organization post World War II here in the U.S. I believe that person got me involved with Operation Paperclip folks and bloodline type, ritualistic stuff that they thought was to my advantage and, to my growth as to what's better in the future. That got me involved with CIA programs in my grammar school. And then my grammar school, we would go to peculiar retreats at this peculiar retreat house, which I just found out recently was this Jesuit facility on Long Island that was run by some uber wealthy family. So I think the Jesuit hand played a massive role in my life. I wound up going into the Navy right after high school, basically, into the submarine service, which was a very peculiar interaction. I did not have a standard enlistment per se. And then I wound up working for some extremely wealthy folks on the North Shore of Long Island for a while before I got my Antarctic contract, which was by Raytheon, which I am finding out from the due diligence of other folks that have put a lot of effort into the research, that it seems that Raytheon's management is pretty much top heavy with Jesuits. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
As is Lockheed Martin's, is what I'm finding out. So it looks to me, the long and short of it is that I appear to be some sort of a pawn of a Jesuit plan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
involved.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you realize that's going for you.
How old were you when you had contact with the Jesuits? Like up to what age, or has that been an ongoing?
I think it was a behind the scenes thing. Actually, I think that's that it was through other organizations that are Jesuit manipulated and run. I don't think I recall ever having a monk walk up to me in a robe, but I can tell you I was baptized in a Jesuit church. I was married previously in a Jesuit. Like, there's all these weird things that now in hindsight I'm looking, I'm like, whoa, like too many Jesuits around.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I read in a book, there was a quote about the Jesuits that, give us your child until they're like 7 or 8 years old. And after that, it doesn't really matter because they've been programmed for life and they'll carry out whatever doctrineship that they've been given. So they understand something about the human mind, that, the potential is only up to like 7 or 8 years old. And if whatever you program them prior to that age, that's going to stick for the rest of the life. I was wondering if you had any experience like that.
Absolutely, yes. The programming was extensive in my grammar school. So when you're talking about those formative years, absolutely. This is what I'm finding out in hindsight, that as a child, I was bamboozled. I didn't know what was going on from a perspective of a child. They were lying to me. I didn't know any better. I go to Catholic school. I mean, it was a very strict Catholic school. You do what you're told to do. I have no reason to believe what was going on in that school was against my parents' wishes. I was in no position to ask. Right. I mean, seriously, like that's how life was.
Yeah,
it's not the way things are nowadays. I didn't get to go home from school and say, "Hey, Dad, Sister Jean slapped me today," because you know what would happen?
You get one back.
He wouldn't ask why I got slapped. He'd hit me again. So I didn't ask any questions about anything. When I went to school and they took me out of my classroom and they brought me to the library, I went to the library. When they made me do the most ridiculous, crazy stuff, which I now know to be remote viewing training from the Monroe Institute, is a very regimented thing. So that's what we were doing ideograms and remote viewing, and that's what we were doing. They would put eye drops in my eyes, which caused really weird effects. It was like wearing yellow lens glasses. A lot of folks that are researching are saying that they were probably giving us acid in eye drop forms. I've spoken to my father. And he
Oh
says,
my
"You're aware of
gosh.
this. This was not authorized by my parents."
I was just
What-
thinking
what
that
were
very
they
same
having-
thing when you said the droplets. I was like, that has to be acid of some sort, because you're young. Probably, it's not as potent as you would find on the street, but just enough to psychedelically get you going
Yep.
and get you
When I would
to that.
when I would leave the library, like when we were wrapping up a session, I would always I wanted to get out of the library as fast as I could to gain some time before I had to be known to be back in my next class, right? So that would afford me time to be in the front lobby of our school, had big, just giant windows. It was all just, ceiling to floor windows, and it was south facing. And it was in the afternoon, the sun was coming in, and I would try to hang out in the lobby because it was like my eyes, it was like I had the yellow glasses on. And I wanted to hang out there and enjoy the effect before it would wear off, that I would get back to class.
Interesting. Clarence, you were going to say something?
I was just wondering, what were they having you view?
Anything. That's the whole thing. Is it's like they weren't telling me that. From my perspective, right? So I get they were making me remote view, but they weren't telling me that at the time. From my first-hand perspective, I always remember the libraries being lunacy, because it was Weirdville. They would ask me questions, right? I was from a very German Catholic school background, right? Everything is, speak when spoken to. I ask you a direct question, you give me a direct answer, and accuracy and all this stuff is assessed, or you get the back of a hand, right? In the library, they would ask me questions where the answers didn't matter.
Huh.
Interesting.
So to me as a kid, that was my perspective. It made no sense to me because, I would do the ideogram, I would write the line, and then they would say to me in due form, what do you see? Do you see mountains? Or do you see a river? Do you see a tree? And I'm sitting there going, what is this lady talking about? What does she mean? What do I see? And then they would go, don't think about it too hard. Anything you say is right. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And now thinking about it, the remote, she is right. Anything I say, whatever I think is right. But they're not telling me this. They weren't training me in remote viewing. They were using me in remote viewing.
Right.
Have you talked to any of your classmates from back then? Are you in contact with anyone? Do they remember this?
I have not.
Are they still around, or is it just?
I imagine somewhere. They're not here by me in Alaska, and I don't have their contact.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not opposed to talking to them, but to answer the question, I have not.
Interesting.
I was going to ask you, Eric. A couple of years ago, there was a bunch of leaders and political leaders that made their way down to Antarctica. John Kerry, the Pope. I'm not sure. There was a few others that went down there, and they just kind of. I think Obama was down there as well, and they went there and they were there for 3 days and they disappeared. Do you have any clue as to what they were doing down there and why they were there? I think Harry Mountbatten was there as well, Queen Elizabeth's grandson. I hate calling these people princes and queens and kings because I don't roll like that. So for me, it's just Harry Mountbatten. Do you know what these guys were doing down there for those 3 days?
I have no idea what they were doing down there. And I find it extremely odd because I can only tell you, having done routine maintenance in the conference room at the South Pole Station for a year, I'm intimately familiar with the room, and I can't really imagine why people would have to literally risk their lives to get to this conference room for the conference. I mean, I'm not trying, getting to the South Pole Station, you literally have to go to the middle of nowhere. Anything goes wrong, no one's coming to help you. Like before, I was talking about Happy Camper School, and if your plane goes down, this is what you do to survive. Guess what? It turns out that any plane that's going down in Antarctica, there's never been a survivor. So Happy Camper School is kind of a waste of time. And the reality is any plane moving around on the ice is in peril. I mean, every flight's a risky flight. That's reality. So for these bigwigs, from what I see, to be completely risking their lives is completely weird.
Mm-hmm.
Is way out of character.
I'm just wondering if they were down there to inspect the South Pole Harp, I'll call it, Went down there to check that out, to see their handiwork, right? Because I had the same idea in my mind that I know it's quite dangerous to go down there. The journey in itself, like, why would these people do that and stay there for 3 days? And where would they stay? If you have like these big wigs that come down there, like, where would they stay because of their security?
It makes me laugh. It really gives my heart solace to think that one of these people had to stay in a room that I stayed in.
That would be funny, huh?
Oh, I would love to know that the King of Norway stayed in the same room in the same hallway that I did.
It is very intriguing to to think about that, as to like, what were they doing down there? And
I can't imagine anything good. It kind of agitates me to hear you say, like, to check out their handiwork, because like part of me is like, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I don't, like, it's like, that makes me mad hearing it, but I never really thought of it that way. But yeah, as much as I don't want to think of it that way, that probably makes the most sense.
There has to be some nefarious agenda to it, because they're not just going down there for a holiday.
The only other thing that I think of in that capacity actually is that it's a spaceport, and that they were in a position for another engagement, that someone else was coming for a conversation. That's the only other thing I think about at the South Pole, in grand scheme of subterfuge, is that when you look at what we do off planet, like when we go to the moon, we go to Mars, we go to any other body, a lot of folks don't know that our gravity calculations are off. It's not often discussed. We work with gravity, we calculate gravity, but we lose accuracy when we get far away from here. Like, so we had problems when we were trying to land on the moon, and they were off on their gravity calculations. And at some point, somebody made a correction, and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, if you enter through the southern pole of a magnetosphere, it's easier to get your gravity calculations correct. So I wonder if there's something to that maybe the southern pole of every body is the place that things enter and exit from with the greatest ease. So I also wonder if South Pole Station is also like an observatory for the things that would be coming in and out of our atmosphere, and that it would also be the closest point to make contact and or egress. I mean, if you're already at the South Pole Station and you need to get off, I think it's one of the best places to get off at.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because there's that also that entrance. It's a huge entrance. On the side of a mountain. I forget exactly where it is. It's on the west coast going south. There's GPS locations and stuff, and it's wide enough for like a couple of airplanes to like fly through and go inside this cave or chamber or whatever it may be. So it could very well be that these guys that went down there went there to have an ET meeting, or to their nefarious activities with HARP or whatever the case may be. But I can definitely tell you one thing, that it ain't good. I am showing a reptilian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that there's something weird going on in the mountains, wherever they may be in Antarctica. I mean, I'm not denying that there's weird stuff going on. I can only attest for the weird things that I've seen.
Yeah.
There's no mountains near Pole. I know that much. Excuse me, but I've heard rumors of bird stories of there being an oasis somewhere as well. And I mean, I
Oasis
don't
in
doubt
Antarctica? An oasis in Antarctica?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wow.
it's in his words and in his writing. I'm sorry, I'll go on. I'll even elaborate. He even used the words flora and fauna in his description.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy.
Wow. Now that surprises me.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I have no reason
I don't
to
doubt
discount
it.
bird. I mean, I've only seen what I've seen,
Mhm.
and that actually is why, like, a lot of the stuff that I want to speak about is about, like, almost in a way, like, when it comes to Antarctica, I'm amazed at how much people, I guess, speak out of their turn, so to say. There's a lot of folks that'll show up to the coast of Antarctica for a 4-hour stint And next thing you know, they're speaking to the world on behalf of the whole continent.
Right.
That amazes me. It's very bold.
Yeah.
Risk their life for 4 hours. Damn.
Well, I mean, it's not even that. I mean, it's not even that. I mean, don't get me wrong. Their commute is thoroughly dangerous.
Yeah.
And is a story in and of itself. Don't get me wrong. Of which I could never take from that experience that they have. But to then go and then speak for the entirety of the continent of Antarctica and its history and postulating its future is bold to me. It's a bold maneuver.
Yeah, that is. You're right when you say speaking out of turn, because if you don't know about something, you keep quiet, right?
Right.
Or you just
I've spent a lot of time in Antarctica, and I've seen more than most. And what I can tell you is I've still only seen a fraction.
Yeah.
I can only speak for that.
What about this from Who Am I? Who Am I asks in the Watchers Talk channel, Eric, what generates all the power for this array?
That is powered by the primary power plant, which is under the ice in a tunnel. We have 2 redundant primary power plants and 1 what we call a peaker. So normally the 1 main generator will be running to carry the load for the entirety of the South Pole Station, which would include the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector Array. And then the peaker comes on as need be, and the split second the peaker comes on, the facilities engineer starts running around yelling at everybody for using too much stuff.
Yeah.
All right, cool, guys. Thank you very much, Eric.
This is a wild tale, Omar. This is just, I mean, talk about disclosure, total disclosure. Holy crap.
This was a fantastic discussion. Rob told me about Eric, and I was like, wow, man, I'm looking forward to engaging with him and, and having this conversation. I'm glad I did because, I learned so much today, and a lot of fog was lifted as well compared to the misinformation that's provided and the real information. You can believe Eric spent a year down there, right? So when he's telling you, hey, this is what's happening down there, then you can take that, at face value and say, okay, well, you have no reason to say otherwise because, you spent a year down there, so you know better than somebody who spent 2 weeks down there or 3 weeks down there. So this was very, very fascinating. Really loved it. And Eric, I'd like to have you back on Watchers Talk and really, dig in and have, a nice 2-3 hour show and really talk about what's happening down there. Because a lot of things that we opened up today that are really, can of worms in themselves, right? So I really didn't want to go down the rabbit holes today and just look at the preliminary of it all and plan for the next time. I'd love to have you back, and thank you very much, Eric.
I'd love to come back for a deeper dive anytime you guys want. It was a great chat. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. So before we let you
great.
go, you want to tell our viewers where they can find you, websites or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. You can find me on my website. Is quite simply deciphering.tv. I also do have a YouTube channel where I do some collaborating with some folks as well, and that is Deciphering My Experience. I actually have a television show coming up, season 2 of Alaskan Triangle. I will be the host of an episode, and I believe that season is starting at the end of August, so that should be a lot of fun. And then this November, I'm going to be doing my first live event. I'm going to be going to Las Vegas, November 4th to 7th. And there's going to be a 5D event, a disclosure and consciousness event that I'm going to attend. And that should be a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah, that sounds great.
My apologies, Eric. What was your YouTube channel called again? Deciphering
My Experience.
Okay, Deciphering My Experience. Okay, let me just put that.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's a lot of fun. I'm happier there's people to engage with, and instead of just, I didn't want to have to draw that slideshow out for so long. I'd much rather talk to people about what's going on down there because it is very interesting and there is a lot more to discuss. This is still kind of the tip of the iceberg, and I'm still making more and more connections every day because I'm very interested in figuring out exactly what this detector is doing when it's in transmit mode. I'm not satisfied with what I found out. And like I said earlier, there's crew. I have, folks that I've worked with there that are negatively impacted. So I want to find out what really happened.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric. I will be in contact with you as soon as we are done with our disclosure conference here on Monday.